6-year-old. He's got some injury issues. If he performs well, we'll all be happy. We have Harvey coming back. But, with the Nationals improving, the Marlins, the Padres, a new outfield, and the Mets standing pat, I know a few days ago you made the statement, we expect to improve by about 10 games. I mean, does that math work? Do we get to where, all of us Met fans want to be? It's been 30 years, since the World Series. My kids don't believe it, and, we're just hoping that, it happens. We're counting on it.
You write a column in Watertown? Let me clarify what I said. I didn't say that we expected to improve by 10 games. I said that we had the capacity to improve by 10 games, and I do believe that. So really the question boils down to, I think, what the hell have you been doing the last 2 months?
Sandy, they're tweeting now.
Is that So I think that's a fair question, and try to answer it. So, we signed Kadire almost immediately as the off-season began, and the timing of that was really dictated by the qualifying offer that Colorado had made, and our belief that Kadire was going to take that qualifying offer and go back to Colorado. We did feel that he was the right fit for us. There were lots of reasons for that. It was going to be a short-term contract. It was somebody who hit right-handed. We were very poor against left-handed pitching last year. We had a hole to fill in the outfield. So there were a lot of reasons why we felt he fit us. And by the way, 2-year contract, 4-year contract, we have to also keep in mind what we have coming. So, as we look at 2015, we're also keeping in mind 2016, 2017, and I can come back to that later if we want to talk about our starting pitching. But in any event, we signed Kadire right away. Then we signed Mayberry as well to sort of address our right-handed bench. And really haven't done anything since that time. We are aware of this. Of course, the big topic was shortstop, and what are we doing there, and is Wilmer Flores really going to play shortstop for the Mets going into 2015? And the short answer is yes. But in the last 2 months, we've considered a lot of different things, but we haven't been in a position like, let's say, Miami. So Miami last year got a very nice year out of McGee at third base. They signed another free agent who played first base for them. But those were relatively short deals. In fact, McGee's was a 1-year deal. He ended up being traded. He was subject to arbitration, but ended up being traded. So in the case of Miami, they had some very specific holes to fill. We, in the meantime, were looking at our roster and looking at starting pitching, bullpen, and our positions. And while we don't have an all-star at every position, I think we have a very legitimate story to tell about each of the players we have that we're looking to going into the season. So we felt, is Travis d'Arnaud an established Major League player? No, but has he established his potential to be an outstanding Major League player? We think so. Doesn't mean he will be, but it also didn't mean that we needed to go out and get somebody else. The same was true at first, the same was true at second, the same was true at third. In the outfield, we have what we have, plus Kadire. So that left us at shortstop from a position standpoint, and we looked at 8 to 10 different possibilities. And you have to look at it in terms of how the position is going to be improved. You have to look at it in terms of what it's going to cost you in the way of players. We simply weren't going to trade Noah Syndergaard. That may prove short-sighted, it may not, but that's the decision that we made. So I think the point is that we've spent a lot of time looking at things. We haven't done anything. It's not because I'm overly cautious. I love to do things and make deals, but the fact is that we were pretty comfortable with what we have, and we're going to rely on the fact that some of our young players have to get a little bit better, but they certainly have the capacity to do that. And we invested in them last year. We invested in Flores. We invested in d'Arnaud. We invested in Duda. We invested in Lagares. We invested in DeGrom. And in most cases, it paid off pretty well, and we think that it will continue to pay off as they continue to improve and get to whatever, stable level of performance they do in the next year or so. But that's why things have been relatively quiet.
Let me just expand on the shortstop issue from a totally different perspective, because it's not really necessarily about Wilmer Flores. It's about an organizational philosophy, and maybe you guys, have differences of opinion, but there's a prospect by the name of Mad Rosario, who is, I would think, conservatively, 3 years away from the big leagues, at least, if everything pans out.
Is he 18? 18 or 19? I think he's 19.
So even if he's on the fast track, realistically, because I've read some great things about him, haven't seen him yet, but if you've got a kid who's projected in your minds that he might be your shortstop, say 3 years from now, or even 4, how does that affect what you do in the short term in terms of player procurement at that position? Will you be less likely to bring in someone long-term at that position because you think you've got a stud who's 3 or 4 years away, or do you let that prospect just take care of itself as it plays out down the road and worry more about the here and now?
I don't know what everybody else feels about that, but from my standpoint, Ahmed Rosario, who's an outstanding prospect, to me has absolutely no relevance whatsoever to what we decide in 2015. He's too far away. Now, if you get to, let's take the pitching, for example. Let's say, we're fortunate right now, we've got 6 starters for 5 spots. And that doesn't include Syndergaard, it doesn't include Steven Matz from Long Island, it doesn't include Rafael Montero. So that's 9. But we also have to look at what we have currently and where we expect to be in 16 and 17. And I would say that whether we decide to trade someone, one of those 9, now, 16 and 17 are relevant because we know that we will have holes to fill. So it really depends on how close we see other players and what we expect from them in terms of quality. But in the case of shortstop, Rosario to me was totally irrelevant. Now, Matt Reynolds, somebody who played at Vegas last year, much more relevant. He's coming to camp. But again, he's someone that played at AA at the beginning of the year, ended up at AAA, had a nice season, but really just blossomed offensively for the first time last year.
Howie, I was going to say shortstop is, I think, a particularly interesting question in this particular instance because there are really 3 different categories of prospects. There are guys who have gotten to the major leagues, but they still haven't gotten their sea legs yet at the major leagues. They're still developing at the major league level. Then there are players who are close to the major leagues but haven't yet appeared in the major leagues. And then there are players that are just further away. They're just not that close. In this particular instance at shortstop, we have all 3 of those. We have Wilmer Flores, who's just now, it seems, starting to get his sea legs at the major league level. If we look at what he did the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season, when he was told, hey, you're going to be the everyday guy from here to the end of the year, he hit 300. I think he slugged close to 500. He played really well. Then we have Matt Reynolds, who's close, who has a chance to impact us in 15. And then we have someone like Cicchini or Rosario, who's much further away. I think when we go to make major league decisions, those guys who have already started to get their sea legs, they're certainly relevant. Guys who maybe appear this coming year or could be ready to appear are somewhat relevant, but anyone who's further away doesn't really impact our thinking all that much, even if we think they have a chance to be superstars, 3 or 4 years down the line.
Okay, let's go back out to the audience.